For the first time ever in U.S. history, the United States might be going broke, and a lot of people are concerned that we are actually going to be entering into a default. Take a look at this. The U.S. could run out of cash by June 1st, Yellen warns. As a result, President Joe Biden said that he would meet with lawmakers on May 9th to discuss ways to avoid a default. They're going to be having an emergency meeting to see what we can do to make sure that we do not default. As Janet Yellen is now saying, it is June 1st. That is the X date. We've identified it. They knew it was sometime in the summer. Now they're saying that is the date. We have less time than expected. We have got to get this done. Take a look. Kevin McCarthy to meet with Biden at White House for debt ceiling talks, as they're saying they have got to get something done here. So May 9th is going to be the negotiating day, a big day to see what happens with our U.S. debt. And also take a look at this, though. Biden won't move on debt ceiling terms even as he seeks to restart the talks. With threat of a June 1st default now looming, the president invites GOP leaders to talk, but on his terms. So there still is no meeting in the middle. They are still not willing to agree on this. They are holding strong to their stances. And take a look at this. Live updates. This is all coming out today. Bipartisan U.S. debt ceiling talks restart as deadline moves closer. Live updates. Now I'm going to give you the latest as to what we're hearing, as they are saying, yes, if we do not do something here and increase the debt ceiling for the first time in U.S. history, we will enter into a U.S. default, and everybody is going to be impacted in this. Social Security, veterans, low income, everybody across the board. Anything that has to do with debt or money, it is all going to be negatively impacted, and they're saying it would be an overnight recession, if not a depression. So there is a lot on the line here, and we're going to be seeing what Congress does. And at this present time, you saw the headlines. It looks like there is no agreement in sight at this present time. So we'll see if this May 9th meeting can yield some sort of results so we do not go into a first ever default. But I'm going to dive into these articles, get you caught up on the latest so that way you can understand what's going on. Now, before we do me a quick favor. If you appreciate the updates, even though they're probably not what you want to hear, but you appreciate them, take a quick second, smash that like button for me. Helps out the channel a ton. Thank you so much. Also, if you want to stay up to date, it's totally free. Why not hit the subscribe button, turn on that notification bell. I'll keep you up to speed on everything taking place so you know what's available for you and your family or what to prepare for. And also, if you want to join the membership group, we now have a join button. Click the join button. You can get exclusive access to me, the topics, get direct one-on-one information if needed, and help me come up with video ideas that the community needs more information on. But with that being said, you guys, let's dive into these articles and get you caught up on the latest. All right, so link in the description below to this article just came out today that says the U.S. could run out of cash by June 1st. Yellen warns. All of these are coming out today, right now. This is breaking news coming out. President Biden said that he would meet with lawmakers on May 9th to discuss ways to avoid a default. And it says Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen said on Monday, yesterday, that the United States could run out of money to pay its bills by June 1st if Congress does not raise or suspend the debt limit, putting pressure on President Joe Biden and lawmakers to reach a swift agreement to avoid defaulting on the nation's debt. Now, this more precise warning over when the United States could hit the so-called X date dramatically reduces the projected amount of time that lawmakers have to reach a deal before the government runs out of money to pay all of its bills on time, as we're now hearing it is June 1st. The new timeline could accelerate negotiations between the House, the Senate, and President Biden over the government spending. A high-stakes standoff between the President and House Republicans, who have refused to raise the debt limit without deep spending cuts attached. As I mentioned to you yesterday live, we have the debt ceiling increase and we have the spending cuts. The two are together in these negotiations. They're saying break them apart. And if you missed that video yesterday, we heard from Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer, who said break it apart, pass the debt ceiling increase so we do not default, and then afterwards I will take into consideration spending cuts. But the vast majority of viewers said they do not trust that deal. Now, in response to Ms. Yellen's new timeline, Mr. Biden on Monday, yesterday, he called the top 4 leaders in Congress to ask for a meeting on May 9th to discuss the fiscal issues. The president reached out to Speaker of the House Kevin McCarthy, Representative Hakeem Jeffries of New York, Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer of New York, who's the Majority Leader, and Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell. Mr. McCarthy has accepted the invitation, a person familiar with the developments said on Tuesday. Economists have warned that failure to raise the debt limit, which caps the total amount of money that the the U.S. can borrow threatens to rock financial markets and throw the global economy into a financial crisis. Understand that if this happens, this doesn't just impact us in the United States, this impacts the entire world. This would be, without a doubt, a global recession. Because the United States runs a budget deficit, meaning it spends more money than it makes, it must borrow huge sums of money to pay its bills. In addition to paying Social Security benefits, along with salaries for military and government workers, the U.S. is also required to make interest and other payments to the bondholders who own its debt. Now, the Treasury Department has previously projected that it could run out of cash sometime in early June, but the new estimate raises the alarming prospect that the United States could be unable to make some payments, including bondholders, in a matter of weeks. Now, given the current projections, it is imperative that Congress act as soon as possible to increase or suspend the debt limit in a way that provides long-term certainty that the government will continue to make its payments, Ms. Yellen said in a letter to Congress. The Congressional Budget Office also warned on Monday that time was running out more quickly than previously thought. The nonpartisan Budget Office said tax receipts from income payments that were processed in April were smaller than it was anticipated, and that the future tax payments were unlikely to have much impact. That, in combination with less than expected receipts through April, means that the Treasury's extraordinary measures will be exhausted sooner than they previously projected, said Philip Swagel, the CBO director. Now, the White House had not expected the date of possible default to arrive so soon, and the accelerated timetable could scramble the president's approach to the potential crisis. Mr. Biden has continued to insist that he will not negotiate directly over the limit, saying Congress must raise the cap without conditions. The newly compressed calendar leaves little time for the president and congressional leaders to find an agreement on raising the limit. Mr. McCarthy is traveling to the Middle East this week. Later this month, Mr. Biden is scheduled to attend the Group of Seven Nations Leaders Summit in Japan, then travel to Australia for a summit with the leaders of Japan, India, and Australia. House Republicans passed legislation in April that would raise the debt limit in exchange for deep spending cuts and roll back recent climate legislation that Democrats passed along party lines. Mr. Biden had blasted that bill, saying that it would hurt working families while benefiting the oil and gas industry, and he has accused Republicans of putting the American economy on the line. And on Monday, the president called on Republicans to make sure the threat by the Speaker of the House to default the nation's debt is off the table. For over 200 years, America has never, ever failed to pay its debt, to put in the capital. In colloquial terms, America is not a deadbeat nation. We have never, ever failed to meet the debt, Mr. Biden said. Republican senators reacted to the news on Monday by emphasizing the onus was now on Mr. Biden to negotiate to avoid economic calamity. It is scary, Senator Johnny Erst of Iowa, a member of the Republican leadership, said in the looming crisis. President Biden needs to step it up and get to the table. Kevin McCarthy and the folks in the House, they did their part. Some expressed optimism that the approaching deadline would force action. Washington's at its best when it has deadlines to respond to, said Senator Tom Tillis, the Republican of North Carolina. Mr. Schumer and Mr. Jeffries urged Republicans to lift the limit immediately with no strings attached. We do not have the luxury of waiting until June 1st to come together, pass a clean bill to avoid a default and prevent catastrophic consequences for our economy and millions of American families, the lawmakers wrote in a joint statement on Monday. While there is bipartisan agreement that the nation needs to find a way to reduce the gap between when it spends and when it collects, even the most ardent supporters of fiscal reform say the debt limit must be raised. We need to raise the debt limit as soon as possible, without drama and without serious risk of default, said Maya McGinnis, the president of the Committee of Responsible Federal Budget. To threaten default or drag one's feet in the height of this is irresponsibility. Lawmakers need to commence serious discussions immediately. The possibility of a default by June 1st could compel lawmakers to agree to a short-term increase or suspension of the debt limit to provide more time for negotiation. But even that temporary salve is far from assured given competing factions within the Republican Party. The United States technically hit its $31.4 trillion debt limit in January forcing the Treasury Department to employ accounting maneuvers known as extraordinary measures, they called it, to allow the government to keep paying its bills, including payments to bondholders who own government debt. Ms. Yellen said at the time that her powers to delay a default in which the United States fails to make its payments on time could be exhausted by early June. She cautioned, however, that the estimate came with considerable uncertainty. Tax receipts depend on a complicated array of factors such as jobless rates, wages, and whether taxpayers submit their returns on time. On Monday, the Treasury Secretary underscored the challenges of predicting the default date, noting that the new estimate was based on current available data that is inherently variable, such as tax payments from individuals. The actual date that the Treasury exhausted extraordinary measures could be a number of weeks later than these estimates, Ms. Yellen said. Okay, so they're actually saying we might have a little bit more time than we're projecting here. A Treasury Department official said that as of April 30th, the government had a cash balance of about $300 billion. Ms. Yellen's ability to delay a default will depend in part on how much tax revenue comes in from the federal government this spring. Payments for the 2022 tax year are still arriving. Goldman Sachs economists projected that last week, by the second week of June, the Treasury Department could have about $60 billion in cash remaining, which would allow the government to keep making its payments until late July. Some budget analysts have suggested that winter storms could complicate the Treasury Department's ability to delay the default. Severe storms, flooding, and mudslides in California, Alabama, and Georgia this year prompted the IRS to push the April 18th filing deadline to October for dozens of counties. The IRS also gave those affected areas more time to make contributions to retirement and health savings accounts, potentially affecting their taxable income. Now, Ms. Yellen has already been taking steps to ensure that the federal government has sufficient cash on hand. Earlier this year, she announced that she would redeem some existing investments and suspend new investments in the Civil Service Retirement and Disability Fund and the Postal Service Retiree Health Benefit Funds. Ms. Yellen said on Monday that the Treasury Department was suspending the issuance of state and local government series treasuries, securities, to help manage the risks associated with the debt limit. She lamented that the move would deprive states and local governments of an important tool to manage their finances. Brinkmanship over the debt limit has revived debates over how far the executive branch can go to avoid a default. Ms. Yellen, however, has dismissed the notion that she could prioritize certain payments or mint a platinum coin worth $1 trillion, which has been suggested to ensure that the U.S. remains solvent. Although markets have broadly remained calm about the prospect of a default, there are some signs that investors are starting to get nervous. They have sold government bonds that mature in 3 months, around the time policymakers have said the U.S. could run out of cash, and snapped up bonds that in just 1 month until are going to be repaid. The cost of insuring existing bond holdings against the possibility of the U.S. that it will default on its debts has also risen sharply. Still, some analysts say that the market's reaction would need to be more pronounced to force a fast deal. In a separate report issued by the Treasury Department on Monday about the risks facing the economy, Eric Van Nostrand, an acting assistant secretary of the economy policy, laid out a dire consequence of failing to raise the debt limit, and he said, a default by the U.S. government, including the failure to pay any of the United States obligations, would be an economic catastrophe, sparking a global downturn of unknown but substantial severity. Wow, so there you have it. Some pretty crazy stuff. They're saying we have about 1 month left, and lawmakers are going to be meeting on the 9th of May to see if they can come to some sort of resolution so we do not have a global catastrophe, an economic catastrophe, as a result of a U.S. default. Now, we will see what comes of this. I will keep you guys up to date every step of the way so that way you know what's going on. And I'll also keep you up to date on any stimulus provisions that come out, what's happening with Social Security, and any of those things that are taking place. And again, if you missed the lives yesterday, be sure to check them out right here as I keep you up to date on everything. And I'll let you know about some stuff happening in May for stimulus checks and Social Security. But with that being said, you guys, thank you so much for joining me. I'll catch you in the next video. Take care. God bless. This is Steve.